Storytelling is a GLPA tradition where we talk about things that have happened to us in our facilities, either humorous or touching, in short little sharing segments. So be thinking of something as you're sitting there eating, and when you think of something, I invite you to come on up and share it with all the rest of us. Before I do that, I guess I should tell you who I am, not that you didn't hear my name enough last night. But my name is Gary Tomlinson, and people come up to me and said, I heard that name before, and I said, yeah, last night. But it's probably because I'm also the Astronomy Day coordinator, so maybe you've heard of that. And I should just mention that we just redid the Astronomy Day handbook, free for downloading on the Sky and Telescope website. Shameless plug. We also have another tradition in GLPA. We talk about people who have died in the past year. We did that at our business meeting, but we didn't have time to have member input from that, and I wanted to talk about one member that has died recently. His name was Ken Perkins, and he was at my first convention, GLPA convention I ever attended, and I thought he was weird. But he was very creative. He did smell effects in the Planetarium. That was the title of his talk. 30 years later, there are companies that produce equipment to add smells to your establishment for theater presentations or something like that. So he was just well ahead of his time. But one of the things that I found fascinating about him is something I have in my pocket. So I'm going to get up here on the stage where you can see me, I'm sorry, and talk about his button constellations. He'd carry this wherever he'd go. He'd run on his students. They'd make him take it out of his pocket, and they'd all name the stars of Orion. Now just think if you had a volunteer to produce hundreds and hundreds of these, you could send every kid home with a button constellation to share with their family. That's a Ken Perkins idea. Now I hope you're thinking about storytelling, because I've got one to tell. And it's unfortunate John Wharton is not here this morning.
Wait, give me a minute.
You can send it to him. Ready? 25 years ago, John Wharton hosted a joint GLPA-GPPA meeting in this very facility, well, not this very facility, but at the Planetarium. I was GLPA conference planning chair at that time. As far as I know, I still am. And John had assigned his secretary, I don't recall her name, to handle many of the arrangements. This necessitated several phone calls between her and I. After one such phone call, we finished our business, and she routinely said to me, "I'm pregnant." Before I could respond, she continued, "And you know whose fault that is, don't you?" Now, I tell you, that's what every man wants to hear. Panic set in. And then I recalled I'd never met the woman. And then I started thinking, am I Vera or what? Never met the woman, and she's pregnant, and then she said, it's GLPA's fault. She went on to explain that she was on the pill, but her doctor told her that extreme stress could cause the pill to be ineffective. So, GLPA has a 25-year-old running around St. Louis somewhere as we speak. Extreme stress, pill ineffective. Anna, is there anything? Never mind. Anybody else have some stories they'd like to share? I see you want, come on up. If you think of it, come on up and let's stand in line so we can move this along so we can get to the good door prizes.
Well, this one also deals with Ken Perkins. And how many of you remember Ken Perkins? This would be mostly Glippa people. Okay, remember the bow tie he always had? Well, he had the lights on that to match the Orion. And if you saw my tie last night, I went and made a Big Dipper ties that would blink when the kindergartners were leaving the planetarium after they had seen, over and over and over, Dipper, Dipper, Dipper. But I could never see it. And the teachers could never see it, only the kindergartners could see it. So for years, they couldn't wait to come back the next year to see the tie in it, and they never saw it again. It's only kindergartners. But it's because of Ken I did that.
Hi, I'm Ken Brandt, and as Paul Harvey used to say, and now the rest of the story. I know most of you are familiar with the story of the flooding of the planetarium, but what you don't know is how I came to find out about it. And that would be sitting on my porch up in Hope Mills, 30 miles away, unable to get there because there was lots of roads that were no longer roads because of Hurricane Matthew. And I'm sitting out on my back porch looking out over what used to be a 12-acre lake and is now a swamp because the dam that enclosed the lake also failed. So I'm looking at that, and thank you, Verizon. I'm just going to put a plug out there because their network held up when all the power was out. And I'm looking at Facebook, and I see this picture from the former director who said, things don't look so good. Okay. I couldn't open up the picture because I didn't have the bandwidth. Or the video. So I said, please send me a still. And the still showed, of course, the planetarium building and the water basically making a lake where that used to be. But I want to finish this story with this little button right here, this little pin. The little pin is the pin for the Phoenix Mars lander. How many of you guys remember that? Okay, it'll be 10 years next year. Okay, I think it launched 10 years ago in 2007. But Phoenix is a bird that rises out of her own ashes. And this week's conference, there are many people I talked to that A, gave me words of encouragement, so thank you for that, and B, more importantly, gave me concrete reasons to hope, in some cases literally. So I appreciate everything you guys did, and I got to say one more shout out to Anna for putting all this together. Well struck.
This is a short one. I worked in a high school planetarium for 25 years, and I'd often get notes from the teachers. They'd have their students send me thank you notes, and some of them were amusing, some of them were really touching. But the one I remember the most was when I got a letter from a bunch of students. It had been a pretty rowdy group when they came to the planetarium, and it was a letter of apology. They said, Mr. Purinton, we're really sorry we acted up in the planetarium, and we hope you'll let us come back. If you do, we promise not to throw orange peels again. Yeah, that could be taken a couple of ways.
So this is, I guess, a story of you never quite know who's in your audience, regardless of the group. I lost my dome about a year ago, but I'm thankful and grateful for the experiences I had, and we had a little 30-foot dome, spits, and slide projectors. So after one of my school groups, a woman and a little blonde girl come up to me, and the woman says to me, by the way, this is Neil Armstrong's granddaughter. So I was incredibly honored by that experience as well.
Which one of you?
Me. So one of the things that's really great about working in a planetarium is working with the kids and seeing the awe you can inspire in them. What we don't always get to see is when they go home and what they do with their parents, unless you are their parent. So this is more of a story of my daughter, my older daughter, not this one, my 4-year-old. I was kind of silly and bought her a microphone that actually works for her 4th birthday. But one of the first things she did with it was give me a planetarium show. And so I learned that Saturn was over there. The other Saturn was over there. And the stars were not out. they were probably hiding and with their mom and dad. So I just want to share that one.
All right, so the moral of this story is to know your audience. A couple of years ago, I was giving a presentation at a local high school for an astronomy class. The kids were all super bright. They asked great questions. We talked about the search for extraterrestrial life and whether life could exist elsewhere in our solar system. And at the end of the talk, we decided we were going to do a little Q&A. And one of the things that came up, I want to say this was right about the time that the second half of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows came out. It was the last movie. Everybody's really excited about it. And they asked about astronomy in movies. And so we talked about all kinds of things, and then Harry Potter, of course, is right there. And start listing it off. You know, Carol Holmberg this morning did a great paper talk about their weekend with Harry Potter. And all these lists of things, and it goes on. And we're having a great time, and I just kind of off the cuff mentioned, and yeah, you know, Snape kills Dumbledore in the astronomy tower. Everybody laughs. They love it. Girl in front of me, probably no more than 15 or 16. Still young, naive, idealistic. Starts bawling her eyes out. And through her sobs, I hear, I haven't gotten to that part of the book yet. I have never felt so small and insignificant in my life. And I look back at the teacher, and she just looks at me. There's like a couple of beats that go by, and she just does this. She goes, and that was the day that I learned, know your audience.
So I have the opportunity of spending my work time with my best friend. I have actually known, in fact, I met Mike as my first day of class at Seminole State College, and we were mortal enemies. We hated each other. So we both wanted to be teacher's pet, but then we discovered that we both had an affinity for astronomy, and the bromance began ever since. Now, this isn't about that story. It's about the fact that how many of you, we talked about, you know, starting fires in a planetarium during the talk. Well, how about almost getting electrocuted? All right. Well, back in the day, we were cleaning up. So back in the day, we were cleaning up from the previous planetarium managers. The planetarium there were grounding wires attached to grounding wires, parts of surge protectors attached to surge protectors. We're cleaning it up, trying to make everything good. And well, there was a wire that was connected to what was it? A slide projector automation. And we didn't realize. We thought we had everything turned off. So there was no way of actually getting this thing off from where we were located, so I had to cut it. And all of a sudden, I take the cutters, and all of a sudden hear, and all of a sudden hear, ah! And I realized, you know, Mike was there. He was like, "Are you okay? You okay? You okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm okay." He's like, "Oh my God, that's the most amazing story ever." And so. There are many times that this man has tried to save my life, and this is one of those instances. So, long story short, the planetarium, I'm probably a planetarium cat at this point. I have probably attempted death at least 8 times. So anyway, so just be careful what you cut in the planetarium. You know, otherwise you want to sound like Michael Jackson like me, then go for it.
So last year was the 30th birthday of the little star that could. Out of curiosity, how many of you have showed some format of that in the last 30 years? So Laura Cairo was here last night, and I want to get a picture of that for her. Thank you. So we had a birthday party for Little Star. We invited the itty bitties to come in their jammies. And we did activities with them, and we sang them a little happy birthday, and then we showed the movie. And we had a coloring contest. And so we picked 3 kids from different age levels, and our youngest was a 2-year-old. And the prize they won was that they got to come in and be a planetarian for the day before we opened. and they got to do a star show for their parents using the Universarium. And so this little girl was so excited that she won, and we finally got her in there when she was 3. There was a little bit of time there. And she came in, and she got to come in the back and turn on all the exhibits, and we walked around, and then when I took her in and I showed her how to program, and we went through and I said, do you want this constellation, do you want this one? We went through and she handpicked all her constellations, and when I got to Orion, I was like, oh, you want Orion in there? She goes, no. And her dad goes, but that's my favorite. And she just like gives him this look of pure disdain. And then she goes, all right. So we put Orion in, we go through the whole thing. You want the eclipse in there? No. All right, that's fine. I'm kind of tired of that too. So we go through and we get the microphone on her. We put the little countryman on her ear. And she was just completely enamored. And she did such a great job. And at one point, we were going through and we were pointing out the Andromeda Galaxy. And she actually was pretty good. We rehearsed it, and she was pretty good with the laser pointer and figuring out where to go. And I mean, 3-year-old, they don't have the motor skills for this, and yet somehow she's doing it. She's figuring out how to advance the cues. And she goes through and she's like, I can't say that. And I'm like, Andromeda? And she goes, yeah, Andromeda, I can't say that. And I'm like, but you just said it. So we get done. Her mom just emailed me like a month ago and said after several months, she is still talking about running the planetarium. And I asked her before she left, and I said, what do you want to do do you think you want to do this when you get older? And she said, yes. And they took a picture and they posted it to the Science Center social media, and everybody's like, do you see this? So obviously you're not going to see if I hold it up, but if you look at the picture of us, we're side by side, we're both looking up, we both have blonde hair that's parted in the exact same place with a similar facial structure, and I was like, oh, okay. And then people are like, she's going to take your job. And I was like, I hope she does. So that's the kind of thing that these conferences enable us to do, is to go back and do stuff like that. So keep it up.
Okay, so we had a group that came to the Science Center, and they were a little rough throughout the day. They were there for special programming where they were going from station to station, and they had to be talked to at every single station that they were at. And then they came into the planetarium, and the show that I give for that specific program, we talk about how big the universe actually is. And at the end of the show, I said, we're just one planet around one star in one galaxy of an entire universe. And I just hear one kid go, whoa.
Yeah, here's a story that I know Jim Hughes told this story at a storytelling time once a long time ago, but I'll see if I can remember it and tell the same thing. Back in the 90s when I worked at the Buell Planetarium with Jim and with Martin, we were one of the newest planetariums around, and we had all the bells and whistles. So whenever there was a new planetarium that was going to be built somewhere, the vendors would always say, oh, you got to go to Pittsburgh and check it out. So we had a lot of board members and other people that were on planning committees to build planetariums that would come through and tour the place. Well, one time Cincinnati was planning to build a planetarium, and so the planetarium board members, or the planning board members, whatever they were, came. One of the people on that committee was Neil Armstrong, and so he was coming to the planetarium. We were told just that morning, Neil Armstrong's going to come today to the planetarium, but just don't tell anybody, just treat him like a regular guy. He doesn't want to be ask questions about the moon. He's just a regular guy, so just treat him normal. And we're going to show him the planetarium. So he comes in, with a few other people, and we're showing him, Jim's showing him some things, and our console. If you've ever been there, there was a little, kind of step you had to go down into a little lower area there. And a lot of times people would trip when they were going into it if they weren't familiar with it. So Neil Armstrong is coming in there, and Jim Hughes says, "Watch out, Neil. There's one small step."
I have a really quick one that Paulette's story reminded me of. I was doing our incoming show one time, and it was during the pre-recorded part, so I was just sitting in the booth. But there was this kid sitting right next to where the booth was, and just throughout the entire show just kept going, wow, wow, like throughout the entire show, like at least 10 times or something. And I thought it was so cute.
So this is not my story. So I'm Ryan White. I'm from the California Academy of Sciences. Some of you may know Josh Roberts, who is one of our senior presenters, along with Mary, who just told the story. And he posted to Facebook yesterday something that I think is worth sharing. For the past few days, the Academy has opened its doors free of charge to folks from the North Bay who've been evacuated from their homes. This has dramatically increased traffic on the floor, turning the pretty quiet pre-holiday season into a brisk-paced time, where we're getting about 6,000 people a day instead of around 2,000, which would be normal. We didn't really staff for more flow programs, so things are a little crowded. What I find interesting, nay compelling, this is Josh's writing style, is that you can pick out the Napa and Sonoma County folks in an instant. The parents are worried, always checking their phones, distracted. But the kids are excited, not bored or scared. They're kids in a museum, learning, playing, watching, and making. I'm elated that we can give them that rather than sitting and waiting to see what happens from a shelter, watching their parents worry. And I'm glad that the parents can see their kids happy and carefree. Sometimes we can even, and my phone just lost it, sorry. I got the wrong Josh on my friends. At any rate, what he did say is that sometimes he can get the parents to take a moment, see how much their kids are enjoying themselves, and just how much pride he takes in the job that we can do with the people who come to our institutions.
They're coming around now, so separate your name tags from your that thingamajig that's white, clear, the name tag holder. That's going to be for the door prize drawing.
My story's short, Mark, so I'm just going to come up here and do this while I tell this story. Okay, so you guys have to be careful who you inspire. I had a public show. A woman, she walks up, she has about 4 kids with her, and she walks up to me and she says, "You're the one. This is all your fault." It's kind of like what you were talking earlier. I was like, "Oh, wow, what's happened?" You know, and she said, my daughter here came to a public show and you told them all about the eclipse. And she came home and she said that we all have to go. And they had Disney World planned. And so, but we got to go to Disney World. And this girl convinced her whole family, we have to go to the eclipse. And I said, wow, that's great. And I looked down and there's a little boy and he is not looking happy with me at all. He's just, you know, and she's like, so I brought the whole family to a public show because we have to, you know, learn about the eclipse. So we're in the show and so we're, you know, I'm trying like, oh, I got to build rapport with these guys. I got to try to make up, you know, what I did. And so I'm talking to this little boy and about what his favorites are. And he didn't want to tell me his favorite planet. And Mom says, yeah, I like to let him explore with, you know, anything he wants. So just let him explore. And I'm trying to make a joke, and I mean, like, anything? Like, girls? And he goes, yuck. So I'm like, okay, this is good. So at the end of the program, we're leaving, and I said, so, you know, what do you think? What about Disney World? And this little boy said, I can see Mickey next year. That was pretty cool.
I'm Mark Creed from Kalamazoo, but prior to taking the position in Kalamazoo, I was in Jackson, Michigan for 25 years at the Hearst Planetarium. I had a Sunday afternoon where there was very few people. In fact, there's like 3 people in the audience. And so you do the show because people have showed up. And this gentleman lingered a little bit afterwards. And he just started asking a couple questions. And towards the end, he introduced himself as Ken Perkins. And we had a great conversation that afternoon. And so I was thinking quite a bit about David's talk last night and how different people influence us. And I knew of Ken's desire to burn leaves during shows and just all the different tips that people have shared over the years. But had I known it was Ken at the beginning of the show, I probably would have freaked out.
Do we have an announcement first? No. Oh, okay.
Bob, I'll start. Bob just reminded me. So a few of us were at the Art Museum, that's a hot mic, yesterday afternoon. and we were departing, and we stopped to talk to the one of the security guys, and we said, "Oh, did you see the eclipse?" And he said, "No, I stayed down in the basement." And we said, "Oh, why?"
Radiation. He was scared of the radiation. And then Martin tried to explain that, well, the moon's blocking the sun, there's, less radiation. But the conversation fizzled. We walked out the door and just said, job security.
Just a couple more.
All right. Hey, yeah, you're right. It is hot, Mike. Okay. SEPA crowd. We talk about the influence and inspiration you give to others. Try to make it as quick as I can. Whenever I was a high school teacher many, many years ago, I inspired a young man named Jeremy Lusk by accidentally hitting him with a 400,000 volt bolt of lightning from a Tesla coil right in the chest. I actually thought I killed him. It was a really scary moment in my life as I watched him laying on the floor. However, he survived, and about 3 months after that, I'm sitting in a restaurant, and a lady slips up behind me, right by my ear, and says, "Damn you." And I turn and look, and it's Jeremy's mom. And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, so I thought I was about to get cussed out for almost killing her kid. Instead, she said, "He could have been a chef. He could have been a lawyer. But no, he wants to be a science teacher." And no, it's coming around for SEPA. SEPA, this is for you. So whenever we came, let's see, we had SEPA at the Pseudocom Planetarium a few years back. SEPA has a program in which they actually pay for people who aren't in the planetarium industry yet to perhaps think about going into the industry they'll pay for the registration fees. You guys paid for Jeremy Lusk to ride with me to Nashville to attend SEPA. And I now work for the University of Central Arkansas. We are starting up an engineering program this year. This is the very first year that we now offer an engineering degree. The very first hire for an engineering professor was Jeremy Lusk. Thank you so much, SEPA.
Okay, so back in my time in Killeen, Texas, and some of you know about the fun there for being in the WAC 2011 and such. That was fun. I would just want to tell you, you never know who you're going to inspire and how, because sometimes it's not about the astronomy. There's a lot of things that we do. There really is. I mean, there's all sorts of multimedia things. There's a lot of cool technology. So I have a friend with a framing shop there, like framing art and things like that. And he has a son that works with him. And he has another son that was, sort of into gaming a lot. And he said, "Look, he's really sharp, but can you talk to him? Because you guys do all this great stuff at the planetarium, and you know about these things. I mean, there's some really high-tech stuff out there." And I think, his interests are a bit outside of my wheelhouse. And I could tell that he didn't want to just have another son following in his footsteps. And as a son of a steelworker in Pittsburgh, I can understand and relate. So I said, if that's what your interest is, if you're into the gaming and you really like that, find a way that you can, take a career out of that. What is it that interests you with this? And he eventually, I'm thinking, of course, we do all this great graphic stuff. If he's into that, we've got that we can do. We certainly have a planetarium we can do stuff with. He actually really enjoyed the coding aspects of it. So he went off to school in Austin, and he started getting involved with that. He shows me this augmented reality thing where this, out of a circuit board looking design on a business card, this thing sprung forth to life when you look at it on your cell phone, and it was like a scorpion that would shoot little things out. Well, he ends up getting this job working for this company, writing some VR games. And how many of you have VR headsets here? Okay. Does anybody know Job Simulator? Some of you? Yeah. That was the game. Okay, so we worked on Job Simulators, one of the first games that was shown to me. That gets sold to Sony. He got out of that shares in the company he worked for. The company got sold to Google. They cashed him out and hired everybody. He got $2.5 million for those shares and about $180,000 a year salary with back pay of what he would have made. Or he could have been working with his dad's frame shop, you know? So definitely connect with those people that are out there and think outside the dome too. But I'm so glad that so many of us are actually there for people like that. So thank you.
I want to thank everybody who shared. We're running out of time, and one real. Oh, super fast.
I know, but I just wanted to publicly say for Shannon and myself that we are incredibly grateful to Anna because she made it possible for us to come to this conference and bring our babies. And we couldn't have done it without her, and you guys were all really supportive. And so thank you. It means a lot.